Riots have broken out in Kenya with at least 9 people dead, over 300 people arrested. They're protesting against the government's new tax measures and the rising cost of living. Look at all of these riots that are going down. We're going to explain exactly what is going on here in Kenya. People are saying that this is because of a globalist IMF agenda. What are they talking about exactly? Well, what's gone on is every year Kenya passes a fiscal budget, just like we do here in the United States. Their budget, they pass it, it goes from July to July. So it would go into effect this coming July. It would expire July of 2025. This time, the budget includes new taxes on the people to generate $2.7 billion. Why do they need to generate $2.7 billion? Because Kenya owes the IMF just over $3 billion. Back in 2010, Kenya took out a loan. Well, it was a euro bond. They got a $2 billion euro bond from the IMF, and it had a 10-year maturity. Well, that was in 2014. It's 2024, so it's mature. They got to pay it back. They can't pay it back. Kenya got hit, like all of us, with the pandemic. So, back when they were issued, when this euro bond was issued, the economy looked to be on the up. The world was looking to be on the up. So everybody thought, oh, yeah, it'll be fine in 10 years. Well, nobody foresaw the pandemic. Then what hit Kenya was the war in Ukraine. That has also hit them. Then there were 2 droughts. So they have been dealing with economic blow after economic blow after economic blow, and they're not in a position to pay this money back. So they went to the IMF and they basically said, we can't pay you back. And the IMF, and they said, and not only that, but we're really suffering and we kind of need more money, actually. And the IMF said, all right, we'll give you about $1 billion more. But the IMF gives that money with some stipulations. They've got measures that they want Kenya to take, policies. Now, imagine if your bank gives you a loan and they said, look, not only do you need to pay us back, but we're going to tell you what you need to do to make lifestyle changes in your home. We're going to tell you how to govern and manage your money in your house. We're going to get in there into your books. We want to see who else you've got loans from. We want to see how you're spending your money. We're going to tell you exactly how to budget, how much to spend on groceries, how much to spend on cars, could you imagine if the bank actually did that to you? Well, that is what the IMF has started to do to Kenya. They basically went in there with their policies and they said, here is our list of policy demands that you need to do in order to get this money and then begin paying us back. What they're focusing on, the IMF is pushing Kenya to widen its tax base and ramp up tax collection. This means hiking up the VAT on fuel and other everyday goods. The goods that they're taxing, by the way, which is really pissing off all these people. You wonder why they're rioting. Well, it's because the first draft of the bill had taxes on things like bread, cooking oil, cars, fuel, sanitary pads, diapers. I mean, this was affecting absolutely everybody. And because 1/3 of the population in Kenya is in poverty, this really would affect them if they are having to pay taxes, increased taxes on things like bread and diapers. I mean, just everyday things. This wasn't targeting the rich. This was targeting absolutely everybody, particularly the poor, if you really think about it. The IMF demanded that Kenya scrap subsidies, especially on fuel, to cut government spending. The IMF is forcing Kenya to slash public sector jobs. They're essentially telling Kenya, you got to fire people in order to save some money. And, when you've got 1/3 of your population already in poverty, you can't really afford to fire people, that to put more people into poverty. It's not like they could just go out and get another job. Now, they also wanted them to, so the IMF has all these measures that they want. They want a lot of transparency into their finances as well. They want to see how much money they're getting from China. That was one of their stipulations. Now, compare this to China. Kenya did receive quite a bit of money from China. In fact, way more than the IMF has ever given them. China has given them, they're in debt to China by about $6.5 billion compared to about $3 billion to the IMF. So they owe China a lot more. The difference between China and the IMF is the measures that they impose on Kenya. What's interesting when you look into what China does is they don't go and tell Kenya how to manage their money. They don't say, this is where you need to cut some jobs. This is where you need to raise some taxes. This is where you need to, implement all these austerity measures. China doesn't actually say that about their $6.5 billion. What China says is, we're coming in to build infrastructure. We want Chinese contractors to be managing these infrastructure projects. Some of the jobs need to be Chinese, and we will get money back from some of your resources from this infrastructure that we're building. China does it a bit different. So they're not going and saying we want policy measures. They're saying we want some resources and we want some jobs, and we're going to build a bunch of infrastructure. That's what the money that they've invested into Kenya. So it kind of makes you wonder, why is the IMF suddenly telling Kenya, now we want to see transparency about how much you really owe China? That's just part of our, we're giving you a loan, so we deserve to know. And they're saying, and now you've got to cut all these jobs, you've got to raise taxes. You basically have to collapse your economy and piss everybody off. Well, Kenya is strategically extremely important to China's Belt and Road Initiative. And as I've reported on numerous times on this show, the United States and the West continues to enact measures to hinder the Belt and Road Initiative any chance that it can. I believe that the port that was blown up in Beirut had to do with that. There's growing radical Islamists that have spread throughout Indonesia and that region of the world. I believe that exportation of that ideology, the funding of those mosques to teach that radical ideology, very much has its roots in Saudi Arabia, which has its roots in the United States, the control with the United States. So there's a whole host of, we're not going to get into it today, but we've got a mountain of evidence to believe that the United States has been doing all these sort of undercutting of China's Belt and Road Initiative. And that's not a stretch to believe, right? The United States is pretty vocal about trying to hinder China in a million different ways. Kenya is strategically extremely important based on where it's located in Africa. It's right below Somalia. It's right on that eastern coast. And so it's a safe port to get goods into. You don't really want to park your boat in Somalia. You could park it in Kenya, and you could then start to transport goods throughout Africa from the starting point of Kenya. So Kenya is an extremely important part of the Belt and Road Initiative. You can also cut through Africa, get to the other side of the continent rather than having boats go all the way around. So there's a lot of strategy with Kenya. So China's invested quite a bit, and suddenly the IMF comes in and says, "Well, all right, you want more money? We need to know everything. We need you to open your books. We need to actually go and implement all these austerity measures, piss off all your people, make everybody mad. There's now riots in the country." And on top of this is shortly after Joe Biden named Kenya as one of the a non-NATO, one of the major non-NATO ally, saying Kenya is our major non-NATO ally. This was published by the White House last month. It provides benefits to these certain partners. So when you get this designation, you get certain benefits, areas of defense, trade, security, cooperation. This, of course, comes on the heels of the West asking Kenya to provide troops to go over to Haiti and to squash the issues that are going on in Haiti. Kenyan troops are known for being quite intense and brutal, which we're seeing against these protesters right now. The protests started off pretty mild and peaceful. In fact, there were many of the chants in the protests where they were saying, "We are peaceful protesters. We are peaceful. We are peaceful." It quickly turned violent. The reason it turned violent was because Congress didn't listen to the people. They rammed the legislation through anyway. They weren't listening to these protesters. They pushed it through with a vote of 195 for, 106 against. That means it's going to go to the president, President Ruto. Ruto is absolutely expected to sign this, leaving the people with no options except to become violent. That was their last resort. They stormed parliament there in Kenya. They lit it on fire. They've lit several other structures and homes on fire. It has become quite insane in Kenya. This country has not seen anything like this. Many of us have not seen anything like this. This is what happens when you overly tax people. This shouldn't really be a surprise. Taxation causes oftentimes riots, especially when the people are already struggling. In France, we saw the Yellow Vest movement. That was a taxation issue on fuel. Those protests went on and on and on and on for months. They finally were able to squash them with the pandemic when they put everybody into lockdown. But those Yellow Vest protesters, they were burning stuff. You just see these protests, and it is something unlike anything we've seen here in the United States. I'm curious if after all of this, they're going to call it an insurrection. All these people that have stormed the parliament building, lit it on fire, are they going to go after them and say that they're insurrectionists? What are they going to say about these people? So there's a thinking that a lot of these protests, that this has to do with Ruto being pretty much in bed with the IMF and the West, and wanting to get cozier to the West rather than to China, choosing the West over China. And this is ultimately the disaster that comes with partnering with the West rather than China. China's giving them a bunch of money for infrastructure. China's giving them when the Belt and Road Initiative comes through, it's going to be a lot of jobs, a lot of goods coming through. It could be very prosperous for Kenya. But instead, they wanted to go with the designation of being a major non-NATO ally. So that has to do with war. That's not about trade, goods and services like a Belt and Road Initiative. NATO is about war. It's a defense pact. That's exactly what it is. And then to go and partner with the West by giving troops over to Haiti. I mean, this is what the West brings to the table, unfortunately, right now, while China's bringing actual products, goods, and services. Now, you might think, oh, there's Kim again. She's Asian, so of course she's shilling for the Asians. First of all, I'm Vietnamese. There's a lot of animosity between Vietnamese and Chinese. I just want to squash that right now. But secondly, that is not what this is. We have to be able to look at reality in order to solve problems. If we want to compete with China, we need to learn how to compete on an economic level, not through bullying, through war, through exportation of defense. That's our great American export. Is we're basically paid mercenaries. We're hired henchmen. We have to offer more to the world if we want to actually be competitive with China. I'm all for us being competitive with China. I think that we should be. We are a strong, brilliant nation filled with amazing people. We have every ability and opportunity and resource to continue to be a shining light in the world, to continue to be a country that the world looks at and idolizes, and yet we waste it away. We squander it on war. We don't focus on actually building nations and bringing forward prosperity. We instead say, we're going to make you a major non-NATO ally, and by the way, hand us some troops. We're going to send them over to Haiti so that they can get killed or just rough people up, because that's the type of stuff that's the industry we're in. We got this really great clip. This is from African Stream. They're a really great organization. You should follow them definitely to get more updates on what's going on in Africa. But they kind of break down a little bit more of what's going on, and the reason why people are viewing this as sort of this Western sort of infiltration of Kenya, IMF globalists. Watch this.
Since gaining independence in 1963, Kenya has been like a pretty African girl enjoying the attention of two suitors. US-led Western group of nations wooing her with wealth and might, and the Russia-China bloc with its promises of a new multipolar world. Previous Kenyan governments forged economic and cultural ties with Washington and London, but at the same time built cordial relations with Russia and China. President William Ruto's decision to have Kenya side with the US as a non-NATO ally marks a significant shift away from the country's previous non-alignment policy. The move raises questions on what Kenya stands to gain and potentially lose by aligning with the US and its foreign policy enforcer, NATO. First, here's what Kenya will lose. The BRICS trade alliance in major developing economies looks set to become even more dominant, with numerous countries desperate to be let in. But Kenya will miss out by opting for the empire of sanctions and tariffs. In the long term, BRICS is the place to be if you're looking for cheap oil and gas to run your country. BRICS now accounts for 32% of the world's natural gas output and 43% of crude oil. With future expansion, BRICS hopes to transform global energy markets by introducing a non-dollar currency for trade settlements. And don't forget all the juicy trade and infrastructure deals members will benefit from. In future, Nairobi will now likely have to get the nod from Washington before it can proceed with any foreign policy decisions. Or in other words, Kenya has surrendered its sovereignty to the US. And here's what Kenya will gain by going to bed with the US. Nairobi will get some of the $200 million funds pledged by Washington for the deployment of 1,000 Kenyan police officers to Haiti to restore order to the troubled island nation. Kenyans and Haitians largely don't support this mission, and it's hard to see how Kenya will pacify Haiti when it's got its own bandit problems at home. Kenya will get new toys to fight terrorists in the region, but that might not translate into success on the ground. According to one report, terrorism increased by a jaw-dropping 100,000% in Africa during the US war on terror. Our Sahel brothers know a thing or two about this, and that's why they have ordered Washington to pack up and leave the region. Maybe it's their example Ruto should follow? Nairobi will get money from trust funds to speed up investments in clean energy. But how will the transition work if you hedge your bets with a country that slaps 100% tariffs on China's electric vehicles simply because it can't compete? Kenyan firms can bid on contracts to repair and maintain US equipment used in the continent. They can also provide storage and logistical services for US military operations for a fee. But does Kenya really want to dance on the graves of Libyans killed by NATO in 2011, not counting the other victims of NATO's imperialist wars around the world? Given what's on the table, whose flowers would you take? As for Kenya, our choice has been made.
That kind of gives you a breakdown of the squabble between, or the courting, I would say, from China and the West, and which side Kenya is taking on this one. I want to, going back to the actual bill that is causing the rioting at this point, I want to go back to that. This is Steve Mabogo. He is a businessman and politician in Kenya. He says the finance bill 2024 drafted by the IMF and World Bank confirms the bigger globalist agenda of crippling our economy through punitive tax measures and proposals. Kenya has been held hostage. Here he is explaining.
Now, when you look at this finance bill, it is very punitive. Rumor has it, and these are sentiments being said by even ministers, that today our entire economy, including the finance bill proposal and our budgets, are drafted by IMF and World Bank. So is the country at hostage? These are the discussions we need to have. Because you cannot tell me we are reaching a level where the finance bill proposes inclusion of levies on raw materials. You see, a GDP of a country is grown by value addition to products over a given period of time. Now, numbers do not lie. Look at Kenya today. In Kenya today, we are number 5 from number 1. Rwanda is leading number 1 with a GDP of 6.2%. Number 2 is Tanzania, with not actually Tanzania. Number 2 is Uganda with 5.5%, tying with South Sudan at 5.5%. Tanzania is number 4 at 5.2%. Kenya, we are at 5.0, 5.1. So where did we go wrong? Most of the businesses in this country are shutting down every day. When you look at the private sector the other day, the last conference they had last week, they said, we are telling you we are open enough, and we are saying these punitive taxes you're bringing, motor vehicle taxes, eco tax, and all this, you're crashing down production in this country, and we will not have an option than to leave the economical space of Kenya. So to me, from where I sit, this is a bigger global agenda by the globalists who are controlling this country. Because you cannot tell me we are getting all this funding. Look at our expenditure. In every 100 shillings the government makes, every 100 shillings the government of Kenya makes, today 78 to 80 shillings goes to payment of debts. We are left with only 20 shillings. We've not put 35 shillings for the county. We've not put 30 shillings for OPEC. We've not put another 50 shillings for remuneration and salaries. So we are living in debt. We've become a begging country. And if you go out here, every Kenyan is begging. Everyone is begging. If you're not begging for money, you're begging to be listened. You're even begging to be loved. That is Kenya for you today. So we are in a crisis, and we need to discuss these issues from a sober point of view. Right. It is either now or never. We need to know, is our country held hostage, so that we find ways of getting ourselves out of this hole.
Okay.
Yes.
So he's there kind of explaining what's going on in Kenya. Hopefully that kind of gave you a bit more insight. We're going to keep following what's happening with Kenya and keep you posted. But that is sort of the breakdown, kind of in a nutshell, of what's actually happening. Hopefully that was somewhat valuable to you. And if things escalate, we'll keep you posted. But I'm sure they will figure it out. And I'm sure they're going to ram this bill through. And I'm sure those people are going to be stuck paying a bunch of taxes. And it's not going to be good. They have made some concessions on it. The first draft did have a lot of those taxes on things, like I said, diapers, sanitary napkins, oil, bread. They have rolled back some of those taxes. I believe they've also rolled back the tax on gas. They've still kept quite a few, most of the taxes, however, and it's still upsetting the people. So we'll see how this one all plays out. But, you impose taxes on people, and this is history. History doesn't bode well for taxing the people. I don't know why they keep doing it. In this country, we've had a bunch more taxes implemented on us over the years. Our taxes have gone up and up and up and up. I believe if you go back to 1900, there was no income tax. And now here we are paying 30%? I mean, it's outrageous. So beware. One other thing I want to mention about these Kenyan protests, just because it kind of relates to all other protests. They keep calling this a Gen Z protest. They keep bringing that up. What does that even mean? Why are they trying to say all protests that are breaking out, from the Palestine protests to now the ones in Kenya? Well, these are just Gen Z, TikTok, social media generation protests. Well, yeah, because they're all the young people. They're the people, the age that gets out there and protest. That's what happens when you're in your 20s. You get out there and you let yourself be known and you protest. Protesters tend to be in their 20s and 30s, and they're trying to now, but because that's the generation that grew up with social media and the internet, they're now saying, oh, well, this is just a Gen Z TikTok protest. And they're going to blame everything on TikTok from now on. That is what we're seeing. Any protest that exists, it's going to be liberal wokeism, TikTok, Gen Z, rather than actually just dealing with the substance of the actual protest. So keep an eye out for that. Hey guys, thank you so much for watching this clip from the full Kim Iversen show. That's right, this is just a clip. If you want the full show, you can go to KimIversonShow.com and you can watch Monday through Friday, 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern for about 1 hour. It's totally free. Check it out, KimIversonShow.com. Thanks for watching.